Welcome. It's the Mad Sager Podcast, Tuesday, March 26, 2019. And New York City is still completely crazy. I've been living here since, I was born here, grew up here. Not really looking to share my exact age just because things are getting crazy again, but put it this way, I lived through the blackouts, lived through the riots, lived through a time when being on the subway was basically a death sentence. Now it's just a guarantee that some rich asshole is going to start a fight with you, which happened to me out of nowhere today. I didn't respond. I didn't engage. But when you come across a psychopath, it's always troubling because you don't know why they came up to you to begin with. You don't know where it's going to go. Generally speaking, you see these videos online where people beat the hell out of like elderly and frail people. So I've got no reason to think that when a lunatic engages with me, they're not going to just start punching me. And in fact, this person did get rather physical pretty quickly. But I just like to be above the fray when possible. I just want to be left the fuck alone. I don't want to be sung to. No offense to my friends. I do have some who busk, but one is entitled, whether you're on the subway or in your home, any public space, you're entitled to be left unmolested. New York was pretty stringent about adhering to some basic social sanity for many decades, but we are back in crazy town. I also had it pointed out to me the other day that I was almost mugged again. A couple of weeks ago, I mentioned this on the podcast. A group of people on Waverly Place between 6th Ave and McDougal tried to mug me, a big group of them. And in light of how traumatic that event was, I almost didn't notice that someone tried to pick my pocket outside my building at like 2 p.m. So New York, once again, is kind of crazy pants. The world is kind of crazy pants right now. One-time liberal icon and huge disappointment to the human race, Michael Avenatti, together with his partner in crime, allegedly, the celebrity lawyer Mark Garagos, were apparently trying to extort money from Nike. And it looks bad. From what I've heard of the case and what I've read about it, it looks incredibly stupid. It does look like extortion. It looks like the kind of thing a lawyer should really know better than. As should anyone else. But a lawyer has got to know that what they're doing is committing a crime. 2 high-powered lawyers together. There's no way when they called and said, listen, we're going to release damning information that's going to hurt your bottom line. Unless you pay us $20 or $25 million, they had to have known that was illegal. But something like 45 minutes before the FBI arrested him, Avenatti, who you probably know best as up until recently the attorney for Stormy Daniels. Daniels fired him about a month ago, and the tone with which they both spoke of it suggested that she felt he had committed some sort of impropriety. And his tone was such that you really believed it. Like he came off as a bully. And bullies, whether you meet them on the train or in a law firm, they're no good. But I suspect one of the many things that's going to come out of this arrest by the FBI is that Garagos was the lawyer for Jussie Smollett. So easy to do 6 degrees of scumbaggery now. So scumbag lawyer Avenatti works with another scumbag lawyer, Mark Garagos, who was representing a alleged scumbag, Jussie Smollett, who today had his entire criminal case tossed out in such a way that people are very confused about what exactly happened. The mayor of Chicago and a bunch of police officers in Chicago are saying that this is not justice and that some deal was done and that this proves that people of certain status can get away with just about anything, while people who don't have an in, who don't know big names in justice or law enforcement or entertainment, get treated differently. And sadly, that's not news. Anyone who watched Leaving Neverland, anyone who wonders why Bryan Singer continues to work at all, or Brett Ratner, there is a difference. Fortunately, I'm not a scumbag, and also, for what it's worth, I'm nowhere near, I don't know that many people. I know some casting directors, but no one I could call when I'm in prison to say, hey, can you make this vanish for me? And we'll never know exactly what happened with Jussie Smollett. If he can't prove demonstrably that it happened or it did not happen, then it's up to our best judgment. I believe he set the thing up. I believe that even a cursory look at the facts makes it very clear that he set it all up, that it's all fiction. But what I'm saying is, for New York to be a little bit crazy, we're just keeping up with the Joneses is all. Keeping up with this crazy-ass world. A world that Apple continues to take greater and greater ownership of. Yesterday's Apple event was enormous, and it outlines a bunch of new initiatives that Apple's rolling out later this year, one that they actually have debuted already, and just an entire new ecosystem that they're taking over. A few, actually. They're really expanding not only their brand, but their services. They're not just in the computer, smartphone, tablet business anymore. For one thing, they now have their own credit card, which is bizarre. This is from the Apple newsroom. Introducing Apple Card, a new kind of credit card created by Apple, built on simplicity, transparency, and privacy, and designed to help customers lead a healthier financial life. Okay, so it appears to not actually be a physical card, or if so, it also has an app. It's going to be built into the Apple Wallet. It'll be available this summer. It claims it's going to have a more compelling rewards program than other credit cards with something called Daily Cash. Gives back a percentage of every purchase. Oh, here we go. As cash, which can be used at the Apple Store. There you go. So this will help their clients. This will help their customers to get money back. And I believe there's something like no fees. But having a phone that is also a credit card, centralizing all your stuff in the iPhone, there's stuff about that I love. There's stuff about that is creepy and dystopian. But ultimately, it really doesn't matter what I think. It's going to happen. What effect it'll have on the world, if any, I'm only going to be witness to it. I do like the idea of having everything in this one device that I can always grab, reach, use. Less stuff to drag around, less things to worry about losing. On the other hand, if my phone does break, the battery dies, I drop it or I lose it, or God forbid I get mugged again, that's a problem. But I like this Daily Cash. I like basically everything I've seen. Oh, here you go. There's no fees. No annual fee, no late fee. Wow, that's impressive. No international or over-the-limit fee. That is interesting. Apple Card's goal is to provide interest rates that are among the lowest in the industry. And if a customer misses a payment, they won't be charged a penalty rate. That is awfully nice. That will help us all to better afford all the new iDevices that are going to be rolling out later this year. So it is a mutually beneficial thing. But that's fine. I'm totally fine with any company enriching themselves by making life easier and less hard for their customers. And in fact, the reason I'm such a big fan of, for instance, Apple TV is because I was an early adapter to Amazon Video. I leapt in with both feet, pretty much made them my video default place where I would watch and purchase movies for a few years. And over the last 18 months, I've watched the quality and customer service and attention to detail and fulfillment of orders on the date and at the price they promised just evaporate, just vanish. Each new Amazon Fire TV is less robust, has fewer features, worse quality than the one that preceded it. The first generation Amazon Fire TV is really the only one that has an Ethernet adapter, will play 4K without issue. This new Cube they've got is awful. And apparently the sticks are getting better, the Fire TV sticks, with each successive generation, but not by a lot. And I don't want to use this stick. I tried it, and it's hot to the touch. It's bulky and gets in the way. It doesn't like being near other wires that you got hooked up to the back of your TV. It's problematic. And so I replaced it with an Apple TV last year. And honestly, if going forward I could replace them as my video provider of choice, I would. And it seems as though I'll get that chance. So another thing that they announced yesterday at the big Apple news event was Apple TV Plus. And it is interesting how Plus is becoming the streaming service sort of name of choice. Disney streaming service is going to be called Disney Plus. Somehow, just as Alexa was born out of this search engine that nobody liked or used anymore, the name was reborn after sitting in the dustbin, unused. Similarly, Plus, as far as computer stuff is concerned, I figured that was last really associated with a failed social network from Google that has either been retired or is about to be retired. And that in any case, the last time I checked in a couple months ago, had a massive security breach and it was just a disaster. But as a name for streaming services, we don't know how any of these are going to go. And it's hard to know what to expect from Apple TV Plus, other than that it looks very promising. First off, starting in May, this is something I've been doing through Amazon and something I look forward to doing through Apple instead. If the prices are even just on par with one another, as long as it's not more expensive, I'm definitely making the switch. Apple TV channels will include popular services such as HBO, Starz, Showtime, CBS All Access, Smithsonian Channel, Epix, Tastemade, Noggin, I've never heard of that, and new services like NTV Hits. Well, maybe this will be a service where they actually play music, with more to be added over time around the world. Then there's all this new content, some of which is, for good reason, a little bit controversial. Specifically, and I would like to make this clear, I'm incredibly excited for this. It's just that the messaging is very troubling. And look, all of our favorite entertainers, well, many of them, have an ugly side to them. Have a side that is not above pretending to hate something or denounce something because you've secretly got something else going on that's going to compete with that thing, and pretending it's about preserving film and what film looks like in a theater filmed on 70 millimeter as opposed to, say, a digital streaming service. I'm referring to Steven Spielberg's Amazing Stories. This brand is, I think, 94 years old. Might be even older than that. It started out as a pulp magazine, television, had numerous incarnations. I believe there was a radio show at some point in like the 30s or 40s. Certainly in the 80s, the brand was reborn, again under Spielberg, if I recall. I think it was an Amblin Entertainment show. And it was a fantastic show, and I'm positive that the Apple TV version is going to be great. However, Spielberg did a big thing coming out of the Oscars, saying that Netflix's wins with Roma were an abomination because streaming services were just wrong, and he's going to take steps to make sure that, and he was actually rather specific about this, that Netflix not have a chance at winning the Oscars again. Now, it's okay for him to say that about Netflix because they were the only ones who were really competing on that level, who had a movie that was nominated for and won Oscars. However, Netflix is also one of the few video streaming services, along with Hulu, who are going to have no part in this new Apple TV Plus. I mean, for instance, it will be available on the Amazon Fire TV, which I've just been decrying. And yet Netflix will not be integrated, nor will Hulu. So it's interesting that he would go after and shit so hard on Netflix and do it under the guise of being, streaming services, this newfangled crap. As small-minded as it might be, or as respectable as you might have thought his attitude was, it was clearly one based on self-interest. There's really no other way to explain. There's already a big meme about mixed message much? And yeah, it's a little bit lame. It is a poor showing from a guy I've got so much respect for. A guy whose talent and breadth of genius I'll never be able to touch. I can still find some of his ethics and sort of dirty pool backroom dealing like this. I can find it a bit distasteful, and I do. And it's important that I be able to say that because, for the record, I can't wait for this show. I've been an Amazing Stories fan pretty much my entire life. I was a fan of the Pulps as a young lad, and by the time the TV show rolled around, I was a huge fan, and I loved it. It holds up to this day. I actually tried to order the whole series one time from Amazon Video, but it was not available. I got some really rough DVD. I don't think it's a bootleg, but I think it's got about that level of quality. Beyond that, a lot of what the TV has to offer is sort of up in the air. Articles discussing the event sum it up pretty nicely. I see a lot of headlines to the effect of the Apple TV Plus event left you with more questions than it did answers, and I would agree with that. But there's an awful lot of very cool looking stuff. In addition to, of course, Amazing Stories. There's something called Little America from the writers of Big Sick, Kumail Nanjiani, and Emily V. Gordon. Nanjiani says that it will be a, quote, anthology series inspired by immigrants in the U.S. He also said that the series will feature real-life stories like one about a 10-year-old Indian child who ran his parents' hotel in Ohio after they were deported. It will, quote, cover the whole range of human emotions, end quote. Then there's something from J.J. Abrams and Sarah Bareilles called Little Voice, which is described as a funny romantic show about what is hard and wonderful and transformative about finding a voice through music. It's set in New York City. J.J. Abrams tends to put out stuff that I'm a big fan of, obviously not always, so we'll see. Stephen Knight has a new series called C, and it stars Aquaman himself, Jason Momoa. It, quote, takes place in a world devastated by a virus that left only a few million survivors who emerged blind. The series takes place centuries after the outbreak, and people are disputing whether or not people could ever have seen, or whether just blindness has been the status quo this whole time. So it sounds interesting. There's also going to be 2 Oprah documentaries. Oprah was one of the many big celebrity names on hand at this event. She's going to be reviving Oprah's book club, and she's got a documentary coming out called Toxic Labor about harassment in the workplace. Wow, do I have some stories for you, Oprah. I mean, I'm sure that this is probably all in the bag, but on the off chance that you haven't finished this, and the even more off chance that you're listening to this podcast, I've got some toxic work stories for you. It's been a couple of years, but this was pretty wild, dramatic stuff. So FYI. Then there's a lot of stuff we don't know, like what the new show from Rob McElhenney and Charlie Day of It's Always Sunny. It's been known for some time now that they've got a comedy in the works for this Apple TV Plus. And we don't yet know much of anything about that. But there is a little video montage trailer that they debuted, and I'll post a link to it in the description for tonight's podcast episode. It certainly is exciting. All of this stuff is exciting. And as I said, in addition to being an Apple fanboy, a big one, have been since literally the Apple II. I grew up in an Apple household. My family actually had that, thousands of dollars, I think a 16K hard drive, that little old classic Mac that debuted in 1984 with that great commercial. They'd also already announced, by the way, that they're updating the AirPods. That in addition to new iPads, the iPad Air and the iPad Air Mini, which are apparently really great. Personally, I'm so enamored with the iPad Pro, I just have no reason to get an Air. nor am I really flush with cash. Apple, I can't wait for this card that rewards you for buying stuff on Apple with Apple Cash. Because as depressing as living with a company store is, at least Apple's got all this stuff I love. And I'm very sorry, I do not mean to shit on Amazon. I love them for a lot of stuff. I really enjoy Comixology. I'd be lost without my Kindle. Their prices and customer service are generally very, very good. But they have seemingly abandoned their digital initiative. Their music sounds terrible. They're not even trying to integrate podcasts in any meaningful way, even as there's this gigantic renaissance taking place with Spotify buying up Gimlet Media and Anchor.fm, which, if you're not familiar with all that, it means you haven't started a podcast yet. But big things are happening in that arena. It's a great time to host a podcast. And yet Amazon just has no interest at all, which is fine. Certainly their prerogative, but combined with the lousy sound of Amazon Music and the now really just unacceptable quality of Amazon Video. It's unacceptable across the board. There's no options on most of my devices to not skip credits, to watch the original cut of something instead of an HD remaster that in some cases, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, destroy, like really take away from the quality of a show. By changing the aspect ratio so that you can now see boom mics and crew members in many shots, changing the entire color scheme, which has a lot to do with the overall quality and mood and tone of an episode. But as far as Amazon Video goes, the problems are so pervasive, the quality so universally terrible, that that's not really an issue. I mean, it is, but there are so many worse problems that by the time you get around to complaining about Buffy in HD, really, I'm not looking to make any enemies at Amazon. I'm simply saying that as a customer, I look forward to anyone else taking over for them. Now, Apple, the one thing that leaves me a bit concerned about handing over all this money and information to them. I had to replace my iMac last year, and so I bought one at the Apple Store. It arrived, I set it up, installed my apps, began working, and realized, oh, this brand new computer has no speakers. Sent it back. They sent one that had no graphics card. I'm like, oh, well, keep sending it back. Meanwhile, I was actually recovering from surgery at the time. I kept taking this 40-pound computer to and from FedEx places, eventually popped my stitches. I know this is a lot of bitching about Apple stuff, but my point is, when all was said and done, Amex saved me because Apple kept saying, oh, we'll get around to it. Eventually, one of these is going to be the right computer. And I said, no, if you can't send me a Mac that works, I'm just going to go to an Apple store and buy whatever they've got. And they were like, well, you're not getting your money back. So I had to file a dispute with American Express, who were immediately, they looked over the receipts and the communications I'd had with Apple, and they were like, this is insane. Take your money back with our apologies and don't worry about it. And then Apple would contact me and say, listen, we've got your computer. It's ready to go. It works perfectly. But first you got to drop the dispute with Amex, which had been the only thing protecting me. So I'm going to say, let's give this one a wait and see, especially with all the other streaming services coming out this year. You know, at the very least, we've got Warner Media's upcoming streaming service. We've got an ever-growing DC universe, and of course, Disney Plus. So there's going to be a ton, frankly, too many streaming services on offer this year. And this year is only the beginning of a brave new world in how we consume entertainment. So I certainly wish Apple luck and hope to make a smooth transition to their platform because I am pretty much in love with and married to my stupid iPhone. It is pretty great. I got the XS Max, and so far it's done very well for me. It survived some huge, awful falls. It survived falling into water, being chewed on by my kitty cats, Iggy and Bowie, and it's pretty great. So it is true that when stuff works with Apple, it does work. However, for instance, tonight's episode, as with all episodes of the Matt Sager podcast and most stuff I do, I'm recording on Pro Tools, which still doesn't work properly with Mojave, and which Avid insists is because of issues to do with Mojave. And based on the way a lot of my other apps have been behaving since upgrading to Mojave, and based on Apple's track record with this sort of thing, I'm inclined to believe it. So it's not a guarantee that any of this stuff is going to be a huge hit. The last couple things which they announced yesterday, by the way. The first is Apple Arcade, which they call a game subscription service for mobile, desktop, and the living room. It's going to roll out later in the year, and it offers games for iPhone, iPad, Apple TV, and Mac. So that's Mac OS, TV OS, and iOS. It's going to have games from Annapurna Interactive, Bossa Studios, Cartoon Network, Finji, Giant Squid, Clay Entertainment, Konami, Lego, Mistwalker Corporation, Sega, Snowman, Us2 Games, and dozens more. Phil Schiller, the vice president of worldwide marketing for Apple, says, quote, "The App Store is the world's biggest and most successful game platform." That is amazing. I do believe it, though. He goes on. Now we are going to take games even further with Apple Arcade, the first game subscription service for mobile, desktop, and the living room. So there's a screenshot here on the Apple Newsroom page dedicated to Apple Arcade. A very cool looking shot of Sonic racing a car in Sonic Racing, coming from Sega. As with all this other stuff, it looks great. I have no idea how it will play out, and I'm excited to try. And braced for it to either not be great at launch, but be spectacular over time. That would make it very much like the iPhone. Or to just land with a graceful, here I am, play with me all day. And I'll love it, like the iPad Pro. The last thing that was announced is already available, and I'm actually trying it out now. I've been playing with it these last 24 hours in advance of tonight's podcast, so I can give it a bit of a review. Apple News Plus. Boy, everybody does like this plus. Apple News Plus is basically, if you've ever used an app called Texture, in which you pay a monthly fee of like $10. And in addition to the daily news articles and highlights from various papers and magazines and cable networks, News Plus has an interactive newsstand where for this one low fee, you get to read like Rolling Stone, New York Magazine, Vanity Fair, all sorts of specialty magazines dedicated to stuff like cosmetics and beauty, music and audio and high fidelity equipment, entertainment stuff like Entertainment Weekly, The Atlantic. Texture was a great service. I say was because, first off, Apple acquired them some time ago, so I immediately assumed when I heard about News Plus that it was going to be built on the skeleton, the framework that Texture provided. And having spent the last day testing it out, it does seem that that's what happened, is they took the news app, updated it. To try this out for yourself, by the way, you got to update your OS. Go to Settings, and then General, and then Software Update, and then upgrade to iOS 12.2. And there'll be an option in the News app that comes with the phone to try Plus for a month for free. So that's what I've been doing. And I immediately canceled my subscription to Texture, which I've got to tell you, whatever you do or do not do based on this podcast, don't try Texture. Because I tried the Apple News app and was immediately like, okay, this is much better than Texture. I can go into the reasons another time. But it's basically that it's integrated with the news app. It's got a better range of services, better range of magazines. It's just more user-friendly, and I like it more. Now, having said that, I went to go cancel my account with Texture so that after my one free month is over, I'm not paying for two news services. And the amount of work involved and the amount of trickery and hiding that they do to make it really difficult to do something as basic and your right as a consumer as canceling their frickin' service. They make it really difficult. And by the way, this is the second time tonight I'm giving a free plug to American Express happily. Because after a while, I was convinced they were never going to let me cancel. So I had to call Amex and say, listen, I've tried to cancel. Here's the emails. Here are the dates, times, and general transcripts of my many attempts to reach this company by phone. And they're playing games like, oh, well, we can't help you. We're the Canadian office. Well, yes, your only website is texture.ca. The number you give for your American office won't even ring. And you don't have, under my account, an option to cancel my account. So if you dig hard enough, as I did, you can eventually find a place to cancel, but they make it really difficult. And they actually responded to my email requesting that I cancel with a link to instructions of how to upgrade my service. And look, it's not even the worst thing that's happened to me today dealing with them. As life problems go, Texture is not a huge one for me. But you and I both have a couple of inalienable rights. Among those are for a service that we pay for monthly that we can cancel at any time without it being outrageously and unacceptably difficult and hidden, an experience that grinds you down and takes up hours of your time. That is unacceptable. And anyway, Texture itself is now really irrelevant because what was good about them, their selection and the ability to read and download magazines, is only that much better on Apple News Plus. So I really recommend you give that a go if you've upgraded to iOS 12.2 and if you like to read various magazines and you don't love spending a ton of money. Magazines are not cheap. I believe you make out pretty well with this $10 monthly subscription fee. Plus, it's Apple News, so integrated with it are all the things you're already getting. If you're like me, just way too many, to be honest with you. Little alerts throughout the day. Every time Jussie Smollett stepped in front of a camera today, I got a little vibrating in my thigh, which, I'm still figuring it out. I really want to know if, we go to war with China or NATO attacks us or something. Things are so crazy in the United States. I don't want to exacerbate my stress, but I do want to know if, I should literally be ducking and covering. But I don't really care what Taylor Swift has to say today. No offense, but I can read it at my leisure. I don't need an alert. And I've yet to master the fine tuning of definitely alert me to the important stuff. Please don't tell me anything about the Kardashians. At least, I was going to say especially during work hours, but you know what? I don't need to be alerted when I'm off relaxing either. This is my time. It's my life. Apple I hope that as this service expands, there are a few things about it that need improvement. Frankly, the interface is a bit wonky. Textures was better, but again, I'm done with texture. But I would ask that Apple make it a little bit easier to fine-tune your news alerts. That said, I'm very excited for News Plus, not to mention Apple TV Plus, Apple Arcade, Apple Credit Card. My God, it is a Apple world, and I'm excited. From what I've seen, it's a good place to be. Get in touch with the Matt Sager Podcast. I'd love to have you on the show, let you promote whatever you've got to promote, or if you want to do a cross-hosting thing, I'm always open to stuff like that. So shoot me an email to matt@mattsager.com or call me at 646-535-4788. Also in the links to tonight's podcast, check out my Patreon at patreon.com/mattsager. I would, of course, love your support and any suggestions you've got for other rewards I could offer. Also in tonight's podcast description, there's a link to my merch store from my buddies at wehavemerch.com, where you can find Matt Sager Podcast t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, and stickers. And coming soon, got some ideas for some more stuff, too, so stay tuned. You can get me on Twitter, too, where I'm at Matt Sager. And on Instagram, I'm Real Matt Sager. And let's see, Facebook, my personal page is The Matt Sager. My voiceover page is Matt Sager VO. And this podcast page is facebook.com/Matt Sager Podcast. As for the rest, my voiceover reels, contact information, more social media handles and links, my articles and blog posts, and even back episode archives of this podcast. You can find all that and more at my website, mattsagervoiceover.com.